So today I am joined by her sister, Wendy, to share Annie's story and to talk about how the system failed her. Let's honor Annie's life and make sure her name is never forgotten. So tell me about Annie, like the type of person she was.
She was probably the funniest human being I've ever met. She had an amazing, infectious laugh. Once Annie started laughing, she couldn't stop. Um, she was a comedian from a very young age. Um, Sometimes it got her in trouble. I can remember probably when she was about 7 one summer, she my dad did something and she started laughing and she couldn't stop. And my stepmother started chasing her around with her flip flop because that's just what she did. And Annie was just running around the pool, laughing hysterically. Well, then we all joined in, and Annie she ended up getting in a lot of trouble. But that's where this god awful laugh started. And it was her signature laugh, and anyone that knows her knows they'll be able to hear this laugh as I'm saying this. Annie was a funny, funny human being. And eventually, it was all gone.
Yeah, it's fun. Mm-hmm. So, how long did she know him before they started dating?
I don't really know. I'm guessing maybe a week or two. And then after she passed away, I got her two phones and an Apple Watch. Because when the abuse got bad, I told her she needed to have a burner phone. Um, and then she got an Apple Watch that she had hidden. And then I got all of that stuff after she passed away. Um, so from the Apple Watch and the burner phone, I figured out that she had only known him a very short time. And then the abuse started 2 weeks into their relationship. She got her first black eye a week into their relationship. So it started fairly early.
Okay, that was my next question. How far into the relationship were they before that started happening? So a couple weeks.
Couple weeks, and then we all had a mutual friend, and this mutual friend said, "That's not good. Like, no, get out." And she said, "No, we had been drinking. He wanted some more money for. They had been at a casino. He wanted more money. It was a misunderstanding. It'll never happen again."
Mm-hmm. Typical.
So she was hoping for the best, I think. And then, this mutual friend um, kept asking, as the months went by, "Is everything okay?" Yeah, everything's fine. I don't know if that's true because at the time, Annie and Holly and Suzanne and I weren't really speaking because of other family issues. So
Okay.
I don't really know.
What were like her warning signs in the beginning? Were there any warning signs? Did you kind of like sense anything if you didn't see it?
Yes. Later that year, Annie wanted to come pick me up for my birthday. I agreed. There's a picture of Annie and I. She wanted to go to the casino. It was at 1 o'clock in the afternoon. Annie started drinking. She had a couple of beers at the casino. Then she started talking to me. She said to me, because I noticed she had a bruise on her arm. And I said, "Where did you get that?" She said, "Oh, I got it at work." She worked for urgent care. And I said, "You work at the front desk. How did you get a bruise?" "Oh, I just bumped my arm on the file cabinet." And I said, "That's an awfully big bruise." "Oh, well, it just sometimes that happens." And I said, "Annie, that's a handprint." "Oh, well, we were play fighting." No, Annie.
No, that's like typical trauma bonding.
Yes. And not only that, I got a little worried because when I went home, I said to my husband, "Annie's drinking at 1:30 in the afternoon." And that wasn't like Annie. And then we started FaceTiming, and Annie would have a little too much to drink and she would start talking to me. And then she started telling me that the devil had been clean and sober for 10 years. And then he started drinking again, but only on the weekends. So it was okay. I was like, "Annie, if he was clean and sober for 10 years and then he just started drinking on the weekends, that's not normal. Like,
No.
I don't think he's been clean and sober for 10 years and then just starts drinking on the weekends. He's lying to you." So then she says, "Oh, well, his birthday's coming up. We're going to go to the casino." Okay. So they go to the casino. The next thing I know, he's been arrested for domestic violence. And I forget what the name of the charge is, but it's where he basically holds her captive and then doesn't allow her to call 911. Okay. Annie, there was a no contact order, but Annie doesn't seem to think this is a very big deal because he cries. He says he's sorry. It'll never happen again. He doesn't know what happened. And then that same weekend, his dad was in town. His dad said to Annie, "Oh, this was all a misunderstanding. It's fine. I talked to him. It'll never happen again." I said, "Annie, get out. Get out."
Yep, because it's never going to change. So
No.
he's always going to be like that. It doesn't matter the age. When somebody's a narcissist, they're not going to change.
No. So then I asked Annie, I'm like, "Annie, what happens after all of this?" "Oh, he writes me these beautiful love notes. He cries. He says he's sorry."
That sounds too familiar.
I can't. I don't even. And I begged her. Her friend Tiffany begged her. So then, I asked her, "How often does this happen?" "Oh, not that often. Not that often." So then I was talking to her late one night, and we were talking about money. And she was talking to me about how he wanted to move and how she wanted to move into a bigger house because she lived in a small condo, and how when his daughter would come visit, she would have to stay in the guest bedroom. It was a 3-bedroom house. She would have to stay in one guest bedroom. He would stay in the master bedroom. And his daughter would stay in the other bedroom, but she couldn't come out of the guest bedroom while his daughter would come visit. So he wanted this big house in Apache Junction because it had a detached garage so he could work on motorcycles because he was a biker. And I said, Annie, why? You don't need a big house. You don't need that. But you see, he knew somehow, probably because she told him that she comes from money.
Yeah.
So he wanted this big house. Okay. So I was talking to her one night late on FaceTime. He wasn't just drunk. He was lit. Like staggering drunk. And the way he would say her name when he was drunk, Annie, Annie. And he would call her a fat pig. He would call her a bitch. He would call her a cunt. He would call her a fat slob. You name it.
Yeah.
And she would just say his name. Stop. Stop. Or she would laugh. And I'd say, don't let him talk to you that way. And then he would scream at me, F you. Well, she was sitting at the kitchen table, and their couch was right here. He somehow got up off the couch, charged her like a bull, and I swear to God, like Mike Tyson, sucker punched her just about, and this is on FaceTime, did not care that she was talking to her sister, sucker punched her, knocked her out of her chair, and then stomped on her head. She was screaming.
As you're watching all of this.
And I'm watching it. And the audio, the picture, because she had her phone on the table, and it rocked the table. Her chair knocked over. The audio is still going. And I can hear him stomping on her. And I'm screaming his name. And I'm screaming Annie's name. Then he picks up the phone and he throws the phone. And I'm screaming for my husband to call 911. The cops show up at her house. He's hiding. So then the cops, for whatever reason, they take him in. They tell Annie to leave. Annie goes to her mother's house. Her mother, our mother, calls me and says, what do you want me to do? I can't do anything. She's just going to go back to him. There's nothing I can do.
Yeah, at that point, when you're so traumatically bonded to somebody, you don't really see it all. Like, you see it because obviously you live it. But when other people tell you, it kind of pisses you off because you're just like, well, I love this person and I want to be with this person. I know they're mean to me sometimes, but, you know, I can change them. I can make them better.
She, in her own up way, she loved him. She loved him. Like she would tell me, I love him.
Yeah.
Because she would say, when it's bad, it's bad. But then he would write her he would love bomb her.
Mm-hmm.
Like, and I guess I don't understand it, but when he was sweet, he said all the right things. And I don't get it. Like, I've never lived it.
Yeah.
In that capacity.
Did she ever try to reach out for like help?
Yes, she did. She was absolutely failed. He was arrested several times, and this is the messed up part. The bulk of this happened during COVID. So, not only did all of his charges in several different counties for domestic violence, all of his charges got dropped because of lack of movement or because court was being held online. One of the charges, I know for a fact, got dropped because he took her phone and he texted the court and the detective from her phone and said, "I want to drop the charges. I'm fine." That was him texting because I matched up the hospital records. Mm-hmm. Annie was actually in the hospital with several stitches in her head from where he had drop kicked her.
And they never followed up on it?
No.
They just took the text message as like, okay, not realizing that this is a domestic violence situation, and they didn't follow up?
Nope, they did not. The detective never came back out. And then the other person that miserably failed was the first trust company that was handling Annie's trust. I had been asking Dara for almost a year to stop sending Annie money and giving Annie money, because this is what truly breaks my heart, other than, all of the devil's charges being dropped. Annie sent a terrifying letter to Dara telling Dara, make sure this man does not get my house, my money. Here's all the proof. This man has been abusing me. Videos, pictures, the charges. Annie was begging for help. Nobody. The system failed her. And twice, she called the domestic abuse hotline. Mm-hmm. He found out. He beat the fuck out of her. He beat the fuck out of her.
Because it shows up on the phone.
Yes, because it shows up on the phone. And he would take her phone and he would go through every call she made. He would steal her phone, and that's why I told her, you need to have a burner phone. And you need to hide it. Yeah. Because if something goes wrong, Annie, I need to know. And that's why we came up with this code. And towards the end, we had this code. She would text me a code word at the end of the night so I would know that she's still alive. Because it got to the point where she had this, it was a weird shaped house, but it got to the point where he was locking her in rooms, because it got to the point where she couldn't drive, because about the last 2 years, I wanted her to come up, because my grand plan was, I was going to have her come up for Thanksgiving or Christmas. And then we were going to basically stage an intervention. And I was going to put her in rehab.
Yeah.
Because her drinking got to the point she was slowly committing suicide because she knew there was no way out. And I was going to stage an intervention and forcibly get her out.
Yeah.
I mean, she had lost all hope. I mean, we're talking about a man who had knives, brass knuckles, whatever, under all the surfaces in his house.
So he's just paranoid that people are going to get him? Or because
No, because of her.
Oh, jeez.
I mean, at one point, she had had a stroke. Don't really know why. And then she went into the hospital because of an abscess from a broken tooth that had gotten so bad they had to sedate her for an entire week because the infection got so bad it closed off her airway. She almost died. And then the first night, he comes up there. Why? Rooting around in her purse to get his drugs. Not to see her, to get his fucking drugs. So then I had to take her purse to security so he couldn't take all of her credit cards and her money.
A little triggery.
Yeah, it's... And I'm sorry, because I know this is hard for you, too.
No, I'm fine. I'm just saying it's sad because I know that fear of wanting to leave, but you can't. Like, you feel like you're trapped, and you feel like the only way out is to literally either take your life or just deal with it.
Well, she knew. She knew he was going to kill her. I mean, I have text message after text message saying, I have to do this gently, or he's going to kill me. Yeah. And his dad actually said, get out. He's going to kill you.
Yeah, that's your big sign right there. If the parents telling you. But she's so far deep into it that I'm sure she probably thought she could never leave. And if she were to leave, find her and kill her. She's going to set him off even more. So, what do? You stay.
And then, you know, at the end, and this is the worst part of it, you know, that Tiffany and I have to live with for the rest of our lives. We tried everything. A year before Annie passed away, Annie went into the hospital for that abscess that was in the back of her mouth, about right here. You know, when you get the shit out of you.
Yeah.
She had the broken tooth.
Oof.
The infection was so bad they had to sedate her, and they did a couple of surgeries to try to drain the abscess. Okay. Shortly after that, Annie and I had been talking, and shortly after that, or before that, when she was in the hospital then, the doctors explained to me that her liver enzymes were extremely elevated. I knew then that something was seriously wrong. Then I find out that Annie, sometime right around there, had had a stroke. Annie had a really bad shake, and Annie could not hold on to things very well. Annie's health started declining steadily. So I asked Annie about her liver enzymes. We find out that Annie has a kidney disease and hepatitis. She's told then that she, under no circumstances, should drink. Now, at this time, Annie's not supposed to be driving. Now, this is about a year before she dies. Annie starts drinking a massive, and I mean massive, amount of alcohol, knowing she's not supposed to drink. Fast forward another and by the way, she's literally getting the shit out of her almost nightly. Paramedics get to the point where, and Tiffany says that the paramedics literally say Annie is a frequent flyer. They hate the devil.
Yeah.
They know him. Mm-hmm. They hate him. They know what's going on.
Yeah.
Fast forward about 6 months, Annie starts going to the hospital. Annie is to the point that she is basically in kidney and liver failure. Annie's going back and forth to hotel rooms. Annie starts posting it on Facebook. She's desperate.
Mm-hmm. Nobody.
Oh, I'm glad you're okay. You gonna offer thoughts and prayers?
Yeah.
So by the time the last 3 months rolls around, Annie can't drive. Annie's starting to lose her mind because the ammonia in her system is so high, she can't even think straight. But somehow, he talks her into, Mama, come home. Mama, come home. You don't need to be there. She can't drive. Mm-hmm. But somehow, she's still getting massive amounts of alcohol in her system. How? How's she getting all that alcohol? If he knows she's not supposed to be drinking, how is she getting all that alcohol the last 3 months of her life? So between visit number 1 and visit number 3, the last 3 months of her life, I'm trying to arrange alcohol rehab, behavioral, somewhere for her to stay, in-home health care. The devil, between visit number 1, the devil tells me straight up, no one can come into my house. All the while, Annie is drinking. Visit number 2, a couple of weeks later, Annie gets sent back to the hospital. Visit number 2, the doctor tells me, Annie is an acute kidney and liver failure within a couple of weeks. Not only that, she tests positive for cocaine.
Oh my gosh.
And I'm thinking to myself, really?
Sorry, let me turn that fan off.
How does that happen? How? Annie can't even think straight. Annie can't even form a complete sentence at this point. The ammonia in her system is so high. What is she doing with cocaine in her system?
Do you think he was just like drugging her?
Oh, yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Not only that, we had this theory that he poisoned her. Because the failure was so quick. Mm-hmm. The doctor was like, I can't even explain how this happened. Fast forward another couple weeks. The doctor was almost in tears. He says to me, Miss Casella, I don't know how to tell you this. There is so much ammonia built up in your sister's system. She tested positive for cocaine. again. And her arteries and her blood vessels are so fragile. She is an acute failure. Like, a transplant is not even, I told you that the last time, a transplant is not even it's not even an option.
Yeah.
And her arteries and blood vessels are so fragile, she would die on the operating table. Like, hospice is her only option at this point, and she won't even last that long.
Dang.
So it was Christmas Day when that last call, I had called her Christmas Day, and I finally got her on the phone, and she was making no sense. The only word she could say was naked. And I said, Annie, you're naked? Uh-huh. And she said, sick. I said, Annie, are you okay? She was dying on the floor, naked, covered in shit. The paramedics. Annie was dying.
Yeah.
Izzy had beaten the shit out of her. Yeah, about a week later, after I put her in hospice, in hiding, she was gone.
It's so tragic. It's sad because that kind of stuff just doesn't have to happen. You know, it's like you find somebody that you think is going to be great, and they just turn into the most evil person, and you just have no idea that could be the person that takes your life or forces you basically to take your own life to an extent.
I have no doubt he was 85% responsible, because Annie, towards the end, could not drive.
Yeah.
So where was she getting all that alcohol? And why did she test positive for cocaine? And why did she keep checking herself out of the hospital? Why couldn't she come to my house? Because she'd never leave him alone. Why?
Because of his control that he had over her.
Oh, he had her convinced that everyone hated her, that her family hated her, that she had no friends.
It's sad.
And, you know, the worst part of it is her best friend, who I am forever indebted to her, she was holding her hand when she passed away. Tiffany always had to be super careful about what she said and what she did, just so she could go over there, just so she could keep an eye on her. She was always super careful, just so she could be around him. And I will forever be grateful for that. I couldn't do it.
Yeah. Let's jump to your childhood.
Okay.
I know that there were some things that you kind of wanted to discuss about with Annie that probably could have led
Yes.
her to the traumatic bonding.
Yes. We had a rough upbringing to start with. Our childhood was very dysfunctional. But when Annie was probably, I think it started when Annie was about 12. She started running away. And then she went to live with my older sister. My dad would bring her back. She'd run away again. And then she got into a relationship at the age of about 13 with a guy that was about 23.
Oh my gosh, it is disgusting.
And not only that, her best friend was in that same relationship. And this person would make her and her best friend compete to sleep with him, to do favors for him. They would eat dog food out of a dog bowl on the floor. He would degrade them.
At 13 years old?
Yes.
Okay. I want to make sure I heard that.
At 13, 14, 15. This is and this is how Annie started to view healthy love. This went on until Annie was about 15. My dad, God bless him, tried to help her. He tried those, like those nature boot camps. Mm-hmm. He tried Girls Ranch. He tried counseling for all of us. Nothing stuck. But I also think that's because from a very early age, Annie suffered 2 huge traumas in her life. At about 2, Annie had grand mal seizures. And then at about 8, Annie was hit by a car and almost died. Annie was clinically dead for a minute and a half. So I think that had a lot to do with it too. And then after Annie had 10 abortions from 13 to 15.
10?
Yeah. Her daughter was the one, I hate to sound crass, but her daughter was the one that stuck. That was the big demon that Annie never got over.
What did she end up doing with the baby after she had it?
She gave her up for adoption. Annie never got over that. She loved her daughter more than anything in this world. And the devil threw that in her face until the day she left that house. You're a piece of shit. You are no kind of mother. You have no right to cry over that child. Sad. She hates you. And she didn't hate her.
Yeah.
And every Mother's Day, Annie would just fall to pieces. And he would beat the shit out of her. And Annie could never let go of that. So, and then after this very unhealthy relationship, that was another thing Annie could never let go of, because you see, this unhealthy relationship, Annie never truly got over that one.
Yeah.
She cyber-stalked him. Forever. And then when she was about, I think she was 18. Yeah, she was 18. She got married. And from what I understand, from what I know, he was a nice guy. And therein lies the problem.
Because it wasn't going to last. Because she likes them bad boys that treat you crappy. And
we all liked him. He worked for my father. But that's a problem.
yeah.
And then there was one other nice guy. She had everything. She had him. She had a stepson. He was a nice kid. And then she lived in a townhome down here, one of my grandfather's properties. Everything was fine. It was great. But then once they were going to move to another state and start over, just, have their life in another state, she panicked. Cheated with the devil.
Oh, no. Yeah. Yeah, it's crazy the choices that we make and the paths that we take. That could lead us from like a really good thing to, like you say, the devil.
She could not. She couldn't do it. She could not do it.
Mm.
I don't. We tried to tell her, degradation and physical abuse does not equal affection.
No.
Like, it doesn't.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't.
No. Some people think that, like, that attention is attention. Like, that means that you love them because you're focusing on them and things like that. And, like, oh, like, my ex would, whatever, like, mess up my Suburban so I couldn't drive it. He would pull this little thing out in the inside of the dashboard to where when I go out there, I couldn't drive it. So I had to literally call him and tell him, hey, it's not working. What do I do? So he can come in and be the knight in shining armor. But that's just how those type of men are.
I don't understand it. And the first Christmas, she was supposed to come up. Everything was fine. She was ready to go. I had FaceTimed her. She had her makeup on. She was dressed. Then she calls me like 15 minutes later and she says, oh, my tire's flat. Izzy's going to fix it real quick. Okay. So I go in the house and I tell Scott, she's not coming. He says, how do you know? And I had the table set, everything. I had a place set. He says, how do you know? And I said, because her tire's flat. He's going to fix it real quick. Scott says, no, he's not.
Yeah.
I said, I know. 4 hours later, she calls me. Well, he's still working on it. Mind you, supposedly, this is a guy who customizes motorcycles.
Shoot, I can change a tire in like 30 minutes. Maybe longer, maybe a little bit longer. But that was for him to be able to control her to stay there so she couldn't leave out of his sights.
Yeah.
Because I'm sure he knew that he's not welcome in your home.
No.
So.
No.
Yeah.
And after Annie passed away, when I picked up the car, I think it was the front passenger tire was slashed. So towards the end, I don't know how long it had been that way. Towards the end, she couldn't get away if she needed to. But I did find an emergency go bag in her front room with a change of clothes, a knife. It's sad. And the saddest part of all of it is 7 years of her life was reduced to a couple of trash bags and a suitcase. He took everything in that house. A motorcycle, everything. She had a business. Anytime, anywhere. Printers to print, like stuff on tennis shoes and shirts and sunglasses and hair extensions and, like funny little summertime stuff. She had and jewelry. She had all kinds of stuff. So while Annie lay dying in hospice, he had all of his little friends, and he had a week-long party while Annie was dying. And in fact, one of the girls that he had in that house, in Annie's house, he married her.
Took her last name too, huh?
And took her last name.
What a bitch.
Yeah. And I hope she's enjoying all of Annie's clothing.
Didn't they take like her underwear and
they took everything
wrap too?
They took everything. All her jewelry, all her sunglasses, everything. They took everything.
That's so gross. Like, as a female, how could you be like, oh yeah, let's go in there and just take all of her stuff? Did they know that she was dying? Did they know the reason?
Oh, absolutely. They knew.
Yeah, that's grimy.
They knew. They knew.
Super grimy.
And not only that, the worst part of it is Annie had a red note, $5 bill of my grandfather's hanging in her kitchen. And I could actually still see the dust outline of where that picture hung. But the only thing in the garage was one of my grandfather's shotguns that didn't work.
Oh, wow.
And there was a piece of tape on it that said Lime's gun. All of Annie's motorcycles were gone. Everything. And the cabinets were empty. Everything. He took everything. Everything.